Okay, cool. It's 7 p.m. in the UK now, so I will start and say good evening, everyone. I'm Nikki, if you haven't met me already, and I hope you enjoy the next half an hour. I'm just going to have about a 10-minute introduction of myself, and then I'll jump on to the Q&A. So good evening, everyone. Cool, so I'm most well known for my job as a professional sailor, but I do actually spend a good chunk of my time speaking and also writing. So this year has been mostly spent doing that, a little landlocked, unfortunately. So why am I here tonight? I am, of course, here to talk to you guys about the crossing last year, the North Atlantic crossing with Riley and Elena and Greta and co. But I'm also here to introduce a new partnership with Outremer. So last year, when we got to Lisbon, I met the team, and over the last sort of 12 months or so, we've got to know each other, and I've got to know the brand, and of course I had a pretty in-depth introduction into the boats, and we've decided to partner up to kind of push a little bit more of the, I suppose, the female aspect. So I'm really an ambassador. I mean, I'm an ambassador for everyone, but really trying to help sort of mentor people, especially women, along the way, you know, with buying a boat, with sailing a boat, particularly Outremer, but I'm happy to answer your questions about anything. And what will that entail? So over the next year or so, I'll be writing a blog every month, and when we can hang out again together, I will also be joining the team down in France for hopefully doing some ladies only coaching with a lady instructor this time. So that should be really fun. And then also doing some more events, some online, some in person, and then potentially some other stuff, potentially some racing if that goes ahead next year. And, you know, really testing out the boats and getting some really diverse and interesting teams together. Cool, so a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Nikki if you're just joining. This is normally the point where I wish I could show you like a little picture of me in this really cute little yellow life jacket when I'm, you know, waddling around as a tiny baby on a boat. But actually, I didn't really grow up sailing that much. My family don't really sail. I had a few friends who sailed, and my dad sailed a bit. But it wasn't really until I was 17 that I really threw myself into it. It was really a way to travel. So I wanted to see the world. I left school. I had no money. I was like, oh, how can I do this? So yeah, sailing was a way to travel without having to buy a plane ticket. And I just fell in love. I'm sure you guys all know that feeling. You go offshore, you know, away from land for a few nights, and you think, wow, this is amazing. And so I did that, and I met a lot of people in the industry over that year when I was just 17, 18, and realised that, wow, I can combine my passion with my career, and just threw myself into it. And then pretty much the next sort of 9 years, so up to now, have been really sort of around the theme of also trying to help other people see what I saw, which is that you don't have to grow up sailing, and you don't have to be this like hotshot sailor to be a sailor. So I did sort of the first sort of 4 years of my career was spent actually mainly with all female sailing. Women are definitely an underrepresented group within the sailing industry and the sailing community. And yeah, I suppose the sort of pinnacle of those 4 years was 3 Atlantic crossings with all female crews. I'm not sure if any of you guys are here tonight, but that was an experience for a 20-year-old, and I learned an awful lot from 3 transatlantic races with the Ark, and we did really well on a Beneteau 40.7. And yeah, just had a great time, and it was all about the journey and the experience. And, you know, over the course of those 3 years and a couple of Fastnet campaigns and a few Caribbean seasons, I just yeah, learnt tons about myself and about people and teams and sailing. Yeah, it was a great time. And then I ran away to America. And so ironically spent about a year in Colorado. Hello, anyone who's from Colorado. And I helped set up a sailing school for kids out there, which was a really cool experience. Again, a community that is really not that plugged into the sailing scene, you know, mountains, definitely not, you know, surfers and seafarers in Denver itself. But yeah, we launched a really awesome company called Colorado Water Sports, and, you know, got loads of women and kids out on the water. And then I came home, totally lost, 23, didn't know what I was doing, and really then the next 2 years ended up being completely submerged in the world of the Clip Around the World race. And that was, you know, just a huge thing for me. It was really like the natural step in my career. I'd spent by then sort of 5 years working with, I suppose you can call amateur sailors, but you know, beginner sailors, I suppose. And that's all the Clipper race is, really. It's let's take a bunch of people who are not professional sailors, let's put them on a race boat and let's sail around the world. So that's what we did. And I had a team of 60 people, and they came from all over the globe, I think over 60 nationalities, ages from 18 to 69, all sorts of professions: nurse, doctor, banker, student, you know, some people who are retired, you know, people who've been in the army, all sorts of careers. And yeah, we united as a team and ended up coming second. So that was an amazing achievement. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Really recommend it to anyone who ever wants to get into sailing and, you know, really wants to dip their toe into the Southern Ocean or the Pacific. There's not really many ways to do that for, you know, someone who doesn't work in the industry. So yeah, that was an amazing achievement. Came home, fancied a rest, naturally went sailing again in 1 month, and joined the team on Maiden. So Maiden was a boat, for anyone who doesn't know, which sailed around the world back in '89 with the first all-female crew to sail around the world in the Whitbread race. And they also came second. And yeah, so 30 years on, the boat was restored, and she sort of launched, well, Tracy Edwards launched her boat back in the water, and with that a round the world campaign to raise money for the Maiden Factor, which is a charity that Tracy Edwards set up to empower women and to try and help women get into education. So it was a natural step, and 6 months on that, another really adventurous trip. For anyone who did follow, it was yeah, it was quite the experience, through the Med, down the Suez Canal, out the Red Sea, you know, bumping off Yemen and Somalia, and a few pirates. And anyway, we ended up in Sri Lanka. All was good, an amazing experience. Yeah, and then just to roll through it, that was last year, in fact. I got off Maiden and fancied a rest, so I went sailing for fun. Went out to Seattle and did the Race to Alaska, which is a really cool race from Port Townsend to Ketchikan in Alaska, and joined a team called Sail Like a Girl. If anyone's heard of them, look them up. They're really cool, and they're really doing a lot for all-female sailing over on the West Coast. Yeah, and then spent the summer working with a charity taking kids sailing. So took a load of teenagers from Malta sailing, and we competed in the Fastnet and the Middle Sea race, and we did really well. And that was a really cool experience. Again, you know, kind of taking a group of people who you don't expect to see out on the race course, you know, all teenagers, and, you know, showing people that you don't have to be, you know, I suppose, white-haired male and in your 50s to do well. And yeah, they did really well. No bad word about anyone who's male, white-haired and 50, but it's good to mix it up a little bit. Yeah, and then the story continues. You know, I bought my house, settled down for a rest, finally, and then got a call And 2 days later, I was out on the east coast of America, and I was about to sail back across the Atlantic again. And there the story, I suppose, with the Outremer community begins. So that's probably what you're all here to talk about. So yeah, so that trip, if you followed, was pretty extreme, very last minute, unplanned. It was a group of, you know, 5, well, 6, if you include Lenny, the 11-month-old baby, 6 complete strangers. And, you know, we pulled it off. And I think that in itself is a brilliant story, and there's loads of lessons to be learnt there. And that definitely rolls into the theme of a lot of my blogging, if you're interested in reading some of that over the coming months, you know, about how that did actually work out. And I'm happy to talk about that in this next sort of half an hour or so. But yeah, so we kind of rallied together. We worked like 12 hours a day for the 3 or 4 days we were prepping. We spoke to a load of, you know, really experienced weather routers, kind of other professional sailors. You know, everyone was kind of on board with the idea that this was a doable crossing. You know, the Outremer that they were sailing was designed for blue water cruising. Yeah, so, you know, when we slipped the lines, it was like, okay, the world is watching us, sort of thing. But yeah, we just head down. Once the shore disappears, you remember that it's all just the same game, right? It's the same ocean, and it's the same job, just different time, different boat, different people, but the same job. And yeah, you know, Riley and I ended up sort of basically double-handing in the nights, and then everyone kind of joined in the day. You know, if you followed the crossing, it was sort of, I suppose you could chop it up into 3 sections. So the first section, always the hardest one, I think. You know, we left the dock, and basically for the first 7 days, as we crossed the Gulf Stream, we had pretty much consistently upwind weather. So if you watch the track, instead of sort of riding the nice great circle, which we were a little nervous about because it takes you very north, sorry to get really technical for anyone who's not so into this, but we ended up going quite far south, almost to Bermuda, before the wind shifted. And, you know, just as we were about to take off into sort of stage 2 of our journey, really, a tropical storm was forecast ahead of us, and we were watching its track, and it was kind of tracking up, you would see it this way, the tracking sort of northeast, and sort of section 2 of our journey was, well, slightly unfortunately characterised by just slowing down, really. So we sort of slowed down and watched that progress and made sure we didn't end up colliding with it, I suppose. That passed, and then stage 3 was pretty much just the run home, and it was amazing. So I was really lucky. I got to see that boat, Outremer 45, if you don't know what it is. I got to see it in like all sorts of conditions, you know, no wind to 40 knots upwind. I got to see it reaching. We played around with spinnakers and code zeros, and we sailed in with really light winds. And then downwind, we sailed in everything from 0 to 60, 65 knots towards the end. You know, 0 to maybe 6 or 7 meter seas. So yeah, we really put it to its test. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, I was a Monohull sailor before, and I kind of fell in love with it. It's definitely a boat I would look at very seriously if I were to take my own family cruising around the world, for sure. So yeah, and then I met the team, and the team at Outremer, and you know, we got talking, and I learned about their values and what the company represents and where they're trying to go, and I think, you know, it was really cool for me to see how passionate they were about, you know, getting everyone involved, about, you know, when people buy the boats, about how, you know, both, you know, say it's a husband and wife, both husband and wife are really involved in the whole process and training, and you know, they're really interested in building a team to go and sail their boat rather than a captain and a mate. And I think that's a great dynamic, and I'm a really, really big supporter in kind of there not to necessarily be like one captain on a boat, to have a sort of a more consensus-based structure, even if I'm on a really, really competitive race boat. So yeah, so we bonded, and here we are. So that's sort of a really, really quick run through of me and my story and what I'm doing here. If you have just joined, I'm Nikki. I am working with Outremer now, well, partnering with Outremer to help kind of encourage and mentor mostly the women who are part of your community, but everyone too, and help you guys all get the most out of your boat and your experience. And tonight to talk about our epic trip across the North Atlantic last year. So I think with that, I will launch into some questions. So if anyone has any questions, if you just fire them down on the comments, and don't be shy, and I'm happy to answer away. I think one guy recently asked me, what do I think of the Catamaran versus the Monohull experience, which is a really, really kind of interesting question, because for anyone who's a Monohull sailor, you probably share kind of my nerves, I suppose, at getting on the Catamaran, you know, without the sort of feel of the heel of the bow and that kind of sensual sort of intuition around you know, when the boat's overpowered, what sails to fly. It was really interesting. It's a completely different experience, and I think it just required a lot more understanding technically of what was going on, and the instruments really helped. I'm getting fired at questions now, so I think I'll just launch into those. So a question from Connell Morrison says, how involved were Greta and Svante in the sailing? Did they enjoy it? And do they plan to do some leisure sailing? Interesting question. So that was one thing I've never really done before, actually, is take, honestly, sort of true passengers on board, you know, and we had 2 true passengers. So Svante and Greta were definitely passengers. They didn't really get involved in the sailing very much, maybe the odd line here and there. And then, of course, Lenny, who was an important but definitely a passenger. And yeah, that was a really, really bizarre experience, and it worked really well. You know, the boats are really nicely designed for short-handed sailing. And what was cool about it was that then you could just do the sailing, and, you know, the rest of the guys could help with the, like, I suppose, the housework. You know, we made a little sort of mini family for 4 weeks. And then another question is, how is the 45 when going upwind? Interestingly, I've just written a blog post about exactly that. So I can't compare it really to any of the other Outremers, because I've sailed a 55. But it was interesting. I think it depends what game you're playing as to how good it was. So I think, you know, at the end of the day, you're not going to get the angles that a Monohull gets, you know, upwind. So I think we were making around, maybe when it was a bit windier with flat sea, maybe 35 degrees apparent. So not so bad. So maybe 100-degree tacking angles, if the leeway wasn't too bad. But I think, you know, if you're looking at a whole ocean passage, what was really interesting about that was, although it didn't feel very close, the boat's fast. So where it doesn't have the angle to the wind, we actually ended up making, you know, still some really, really good VNG. I think at the beginning of the crossing, we had, you know, some of the world's best weather routers saying, hey guys, you should be, you know, here by you know, midnight tomorrow night or something, you know, based on what we think you'll make in that wind angle. And we were always surpassing it. Like, I think if anyone's used routing software, you know, you always kind of dumb it down slightly for your polars, and we were almost pushing the polars, you know, we were. So I think overall, if I was to look at the passage, while you don't have the angles, you do have the speeds. So the VMG, for if you're technical, is still pretty good. I was really impressed. And the Daggerboards definitely help. You know, you don't have that feeling of sliding across the water. And for anyone who is kind of intimidated by Daggerboards, you know, they're actually really simple. You only need to go out on a dinghy for a couple of days, and they would suddenly feel much less scary. Tim has asked, hi there, where would you like to cruise with a family one day? Well, I'd love to cruise with a family. Very, very jealous of anyone who's cruising with your family right now, that's for sure. Sounds like the most... well, hopefully you can hear me. I'm getting a message saying, sorry, we're having trouble with this video. Sounds like it's the most socially distanced place to be at the moment, so very safe. Yes, I'd love to cruise with a family, and I'd love to cruise around the world. And having got very, very many friends who are cruising around the world with their families, of course, Riley and Elena included, I think there's definitely a good way and a bad way to do it. And I'd love to sail in Southeast Asia. When I was sailing on the Clipper race, we ended up racing from Airlie Beach on the east coast of Australia up to Sanya in China, and we passed the most amazing places. It was so criminal that we passed them and we didn't stop, and I'd love to go back there and see those islands again. So from Mark, is there a major difference in storm tactics between monohull and multi-hull? So again, I admit that I am not, you know, your 10-year seasoned monohull expert here, multi-hull expert here. But there are definitely some really clear differences that I found on our trip from any monohull sailing I've done. So one of the hugest ones is how the boat deals with the sea state. On a monohull, you know, when the boat's overpowered, it tends to just round up into the wind and, you know, obviously heel over. And the catamaran that we were on, you just don't get that. She slides sideways a lot, but she didn't really round up. And just to keep it really, really basic, I think that's something, you know, that I took away that Riley and Elena were perhaps slightly better at, to be honest. I just come from a racing background. I was always like, let's go, 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 let's push the boat, I mean, to a certain extent. Whereas I think they were much more used to sailing much more conservatively. And I think your sort of wiggle room on the catamaran is definitely less. I think when it's too much very quickly. So turning the boat into the wind and into the sea state feels a lot more daunting than on a monohull. So I suppose my main storm tactic on a multi-hull that's different from a monohull would have been reduce canvas quicker, because the canvas doesn't tell you what's going on like it does on a monohull. Hopefully that's it. Perhaps I'll end up in some storms in some more, and I'll give you some more detailed information there. So Rudolph asked, can you share on situations where Riley and you disagreed on the way to proceed? Yeah, I'm happy to. It wasn't all smooth sailing, and I think that was natural. And I think I'm sure it was quite entertaining for Elena and Greta and Svante to eavesdrop on our heated discussions, especially towards the end. I think, you know, in any trip, the closer to land you get, kind of the more antsy people get, and it's slightly harder to make decisions because there are a lot more pressures on you, you know, to get there on time, to predict the time you're getting there, to you know, not to break anything, but then you feel a little bit more confident because you're closer. So one of the things I suppose we struggled with the decision making was was how to respond to weather routers. So Riley's used, I'm sure, used weather routing before, as have I. Because I come from a racing background, whereas he, you know, I have a racing hat on, and Riley has, he definitely likes to go fast, but he of course has his family hat on. I think we tended to interpret those routing instructions slightly differently, and I suppose one part of that was the hat that we were wearing. Another part of it is just our personalities and what's sort of what we value. And I think I very, very much value, I suppose, freedom and independence quite highly. And I find that when you get a message in from a weather router saying, you know, you should do X, I'm quite hesitant to respond very quickly. Whereas Riley was quite quick to respond, and I think there was not really a right and a wrong way, but sometimes we would clash slightly because perhaps he would, you know, change course, and then I would be like, hey, what's going on? Why have we changed course? And you know, I would want to chat it through. I don't know if this is a male-female dynamic, or I'm sure a psychologist could talk about a lot of this, but yeah, so we differed on that subject quite a lot. But we made it happen in the end. I think we just had to, you know, two strangers at the beginning. By sort of week 3, I think we were smoothed out in exactly how we make decisions. So an interesting question from Coos Ben. Did you ever, during the crossing, find that the boat might have been too heavily loaded, so would have sailed better when lighter? Without a doubt, the Outremer would have sailed better with less stuff on. There is absolutely no question that the boat would have been faster, at least. When you surf off waves, you can really feel where she would have, you know, really lifted off and started planing. And because we were a little bit heavier, she slowed down. But at the end of the day, you know, a couple of knots or a big surf versus having full water tanks all the time, or having the fuel should we need to motor to a safe haven, or you know, keeping all the people on board, there was no question that was the most important thing. And I think, you know, always, like, the safety equipment, which tends to be quite heavy, is the most important. The food is sort of pretty close up there as well for morale. So yeah, so to reiterate, yes, it would have been faster with less stuff on, but that's not necessarily the right thing. So good question. What's a good race or cruise to start real sailing experience? So I would really, really recommend, if anyone is trying to really build their experience sailing, I would recommend 2 things. I would try, if you can, to get, and you want to race or cruise, I would try, if you can, get on a long trip. A long trip, so a delivery. You know, often people are looking for someone to jump on board. You know, some of the best deliveries I did at the beginning of my career were deliveries to races. The reason that those were so good is you're often on a more technical boat, and you probably know the boat is going to be sound and the crew will be experienced, because it's going to have to comply with race regulations in terms of safety equipment and structure of the boat. So those are really, really good ones if you can find them. And often the race crew don't want to do those deliveries. But the long aspect of the trip means that you're going to have that time to break down that kind of initial, I'm on a new boat, I don't really know what's going on, I don't know anyone, I feel too nervous to pull ropes, I'm going to be the last to volunteer to helm. You know, on a one-day sail, you're never going to get there. So especially if you're new, try to get a longer trip where, you know, it's nighttime and some people go to sleep, and you can really then have a little go at something you might not have done before when not everyone's watching. So I'd really, really recommend that. And then at the same time, I think inshore racing is excellent for building skills, especially understanding of you know, sails, hoisting and dropping sails, kind of like the maneuvers around the boat, and really getting comfortable with moving around a boat and moving around the boat with people. And if you can jump on, even just sitting on the rail, there is nothing wrong with sitting on the rail for a season. And if you can commit to every Saturday, you know, especially if you're in the UK or anywhere coastal, even lakes, I could sail every Wednesday in Denver on a little J22. So if you can do that, you'll also start to really, really get more confident and learn a lot. So a question from Alexandru. She says, or he says, for long-term liveaboard, is it better to have a heavy boat or a light one from a comfort point of view? This is another good question, actually. I think that the thing that ultimately, you know, what are you really asking when you're asking is about heavy? You're asking what's in it, what's the boat made of, how big is the boat? You know, at the end of the day, I do agree with the people who sort of say that, well, I personally feel that an efficient boat is probably the safest and the most comfortable boat. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if your boat is light or heavy. If you're sailing to windward, especially in the Monohull, but if you're sailing to windward in 40 knots of wind and a big seaway, it's going to be uncomfortable. And if the boat is 10 tons more, it's probably still going to be uncomfortable. So I would want to balance that with feeling like the boat was at least sailing well. You know, if you get a yeah, so I think sailing well and sailing smoothly and sailing good angles, having a good sail set option is really, really important as well. These are the kind of questions you should be asking yourself if you're living aboard. A liveaboard too, you know, are you short-handed? Is there 2 of you, 3 of you? Therefore, the likelihood is that you may have injuries, or someone might get ill, or, you know, someone might be down. Can you sail the boat short-handed? Sometimes with heavy boats, they're a lot more difficult to manage on your own, so that's a question. The only thing that's sort of directly related to heavy or light that I would feel quite strongly about is I wouldn't go too small if you're planning on living aboard, because there have been a lot of studies to say that, you know, if you get over a certain length, they're sort of significantly more safe in big seas. And that is something, you know, at the end of the day, that you can handle the wind, you can drop all the sails, you can drag lines, but I think the big seas issue is important. And yeah, look at the length of the boat you're getting. So Mark Ruka asked, in what way is, in your view, Outremer, I often say Outremer, does anyone else do that? Outremer outstanding other brands? So I think, especially from visiting Outremer's headquarters down in Le Grand Motte, I think that the real sort of essence or sort of feel you get at Outremer that I haven't necessarily, well, that is, I feel is quite unique, is the real passion for, I suppose, every individual owner's story. I think they really are interested in getting to know the people that are buying the boat, what they want from it, and really kind of like holding their hand through the process and making sure that the boat that they buy is the right one for them, rather than just the one that makes the company the most money. They make enough money, you know, they're not cheap boats, so they don't have to push you in directions that aren't necessarily the right ones for you. And I think that's really, really key. A really, really sort of nice quality to the company. Otherwise, I mean, they're extremely well-built boats. You know, they're up there with the other sort of very, very reputable brands. of monohulls, especially as I know a little bit more about monohulls. But you know, some small things like the way that they sort of glass everything into the structure. They're real sort of in-depth thought about the width of the hulls and the catering towards very specifically family or sort of short-handed blue water cruising. I think that you know, if you're going to go blue water cruising, don't buy a coastal cruising boat. Buy the blue water cruising boat, and there aren't that many out there. And I think Outremer may be, you know, one of the only ones you should be looking at in that price range. So Bob Spencer asked, scary moments. So a number of scary moments. I think I have to say, I don't know if anyone else gets this, but leaving the dock was pretty scary in the snow. You know, sort of that realisation, oh my gosh, 4 days ago I was at home and now I'm about to set off across the North Atlantic. And most people I know are saying, yeah, great idea, go you guys. And a few people I know who I do also respect are saying, what a terrible idea, what on earth are you doing? And that little imposter, that little angel on my shoulder that tells me not to be confident and to doubt my decisions, definitely tried to shout a lot of things in my ear. And I think that does feel scary. You know, it does feel scary to think, okay, I'm here to sort of bolster the safety of the crew and you know, gosh, this is the right decision. And I think it's really, really, I really hope that everyone realises that it doesn't matter how many oceans you've crossed and how many Clip Around the World races you've done, and you still have that person saying that, and it's a good thing. And I think it really questions, you know, hey, am I doing a stupid thing? I need to check down my list of all the things, like, you know, is sort of my must-haves there. Do I feel like it's definitely going to be safe? And I do have this sort of almost checklist of like, okay, what if that goes wrong? What should I do? What if that goes wrong? And if I don't have the answers, we shouldn't go. So that was quite scary. In terms of big waves and that sort of thing, you know, I sort of laugh with some of my colleagues because it was a tough crossing. It was a tough crossing. It was a boat I didn't know, but it was manageable. And I think, you know, it was manageable partly because the boat was designed very well for it, because we had good crew, they knew the boat, but also the weather was okay as well. And maybe, you know, being on deck and seeing lightning literally spark kind of, I don't know if it was feet, meters or kilometres away, but it felt very, very close. I could see the droplets, you know, spark up from the water. And then I thought, you know, there's basically nothing I can do to stop that lightning hitting us. So that sort of feeling of being out of control, I think, dependent on your experience, I think that's always the thing that's the most scary, is like, I don't know what to do here, or I have no control in our safety here. And in a lot of ways, we didn't really. So that was probably the scariest moment, I'd say. So Mark Watland says, how do you think the Outremer would do in the race to Alaska? Do you know what? I've been thinking the same thing. I think it would do great. I think, you know, one great thing, one of the things I was thinking about the race to Alaska and an Outremer would be cool is that if anyone was following last race, one of the hulls hit a log, which is really, really common. There are a lot of logs down the inside passage. The Sail Like a Girl team will know a lot about that from their race. They did the year before me. But the nature of the fact that the Outremer has watertight bulkheads at the front of the boat, I think 4, I thought, oh, like that could be kind of a good safety net, because I think with the boats that go really, really fast, that can be kind of a worry. The other cool thing about the Outremer on Race to Alaska would be obviously that it's quite shallow. So, you know, especially when you start beating against the tide. I think I remember us going through up the Campbell River, which is sort of, for anyone who doesn't know the race or the area, is a really, really heavily tidal part of the course. I think it was flowing out, you know, whirlpools everywhere, flowing out like 6 or 7 knots maybe when we were there. And if we had been a bit shallower, you know, we could have hugged the coast and really got out of it and probably made some headway. So yeah, there's definitely some entrancing things about taking an Outremer on that race. Might be quite a job to get the engines out, which is something you have to do, but definitely not unachievable. So, how was it for you with the lightning during the crossing? Is a question from Michael. Did you think about losing all your electronics? Yeah, as I said, the lightning was pretty scary. There's not really anything you can do. I think, you know, we could sit here all day and talk about how you shouldn't end up in lightning storms, and you know, but they happen in flat calm, and I think you just have to do all you can. We did turn off all the electronics, and I do have friends who have been struck by lightning and they have blasted all their electronics. One thing I always do, since knowing some people who have been struck, is I always take a number of handheld GPSs and handheld radios with me, and that are battery powered, so they don't rely on the boat. And I really recommend doing that. So thinking of some sort of way that if you did lose all your power, you'd have a backup plan. You know, literally all power, all batteries. Imagine that scenario. What would you do? Per Musil says, did you feel safe during your trip over the Atlantic, or was there moments of fear, especially in rough weather? So safe, yes. I did feel safe. I trusted the boat, and that really only increased with every day that you sail on a new boat. You kind of, yeah, you get kind of friendly with the boat, and you get to know her and you push her a little bit harder, and you know, something like a big crossing is a really great thing to do quite early on if you ever own a boat, because you end up in weather that you would just never go out in. Like, you know, if you do a 2-week crossing across the Atlantic, say when you bought your Outremer from France quite early on, you're going to find out an awful lot about your boat that you just never do. You know, if it's bad weather or it's upwind, you know, what are you going to do if you're coastal sailing? You're going to drop the hook and you're going to have a cocktail and you're going to say, let's go tomorrow. You know, get out there as soon as you can and test it out. But yeah, moments of fear, you know, it's a good question. We could do an entire hour chatting about fear and sailing. You know, when you're in a position of responsibility, do you allow yourself to really feel afraid, or do you not? You know, I think in some ways I don't really allow myself to. I think it's almost an indulgent feeling. You know, at the end of the day, just like a parent, you know, if I'm afraid, you know, what is Svante and Greta going to feel? If I'm afraid, we're in way too deep at that point, and we were never in too deep, and so I never felt really afraid. I think that's the best way to describe that. Yeah, like being a little sort of mum on the boat, I suppose, just getting on with it and doing what I needed to do. Cool. Peter says, hi, did you use Daggerboards only upwind or also downwind? So I assume you all know what Daggerboards are. Just very quickly, they are literally boards that you can drop down into the water around midships on each hull, a bit like being on a dinghy, or you can lift them all the way up, or you can put them halfway. So we did use them upwind, and we did also use them downwind. So one thing that, to be honest, Riley guided me on, and I thought was a great idea, was sometimes if we're going fast, we would, if it was flat sea and we're going quite fast, we might put one into just sort of the same depth as the rudder, and it almost kind of acted as a bit of a protection for the rudder. So we kind of figured if we hit something head on, it will break that, which is the Daggerboards on the Outremer come down a really, really, really strongly reinforced section of the boat. So if you know, a container or something hit them, it would be better to hit them than the rudder. So sometimes we did that, but then at the same time, you also have to weigh up the big waves. So you know, the waves are huge. You're going upwind or downwind. You know, sometimes you need to have the ability to almost slide over them rather than cutting through the water. So to be honest, we played around with it, and I would need probably a year to tell you the exact theory about what I feel that the Daggerboard should perfectly be doing in each sea condition, each wind. But yeah, in short, we use them upwind and downwind. Cool. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. So, Kuz, Ben, what breakages did you have to fix during the crossing? So do watch Riley and Elena's videos, and they talk a lot about breakages and pretty much cover them all. Very, very few breakages. It was quite extraordinary, actually. We had a few little niggles, and I have to say it was one of those moments where, you know, when you forget the rules and you get lazy, your own rules. One of my rules being try not to fix a job as soon as you see it. Don't walk over a job. Of course, naturally, we walked over a job, and then, you know, what do you end up doing in the middle of the night? You're fixing the furling line or the bow in 35 knots of wind, and yeah, so the furling line snapped, just a little bit of chafing. We had a niggle with the steering cable, but ended up just being a little bit of plastic on a plastic cover on the cable behind the cupboard in the saloon. A few niggles with the instruments, which generally just sorted themselves out by turning off and on. Yeah, really nothing too huge. I mean, we were sailing the boat conservatively. You know, there was some important people aboard. Everyone, in fact. I felt like I was surrounded by celebrities. Cool. So last question here, I think. What was the deal with the life raft? Was it hanging loose under the boat? So very simply, the life raft is positioned in a very sensible place. But we were in really, really rough weather. And again, as I said, don't walk over jobs. You know, one of the standard things we should do on board is do a deck walk, and I think we probably should have done 2 a day and not 1, I suppose. But no, the webbing straps that hold it just came a little loose, so it was actually still fully in its cradle and still in what, like, it was still being held up, but it was it had dropped a little bit. And because it had dropped, it was therefore not sort of really snug in its cradle, but sort of swinging around a bit. And to be honest, it probably would have been fine to have left it there, but that wasn't really a risk we wanted to take. So yeah, we just lifted it up and took it back. So on that cheerful note, I think I'm 50 minutes in, and I think I'm going to stop there. It was really, really, really cool to do this. This is my first ever Facebook Live, and I'm really happy for anyone who's in the UK. This is one of the loudest nights for fireworks, I think, today and tomorrow. I think someone decided Halloween came early today, so I'm really happy that they haven't been banging too much. But yeah, great to see you all tonight, and I think Outremer are planning on doing a lot of other online events, and I'm sure I'll be running some webinars, you know, some more structured teaching and stuff throughout the next few months. So do stay tuned on their Facebook site to see that, and they'll know more about it than me. But yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to working with you guys and hopefully, you know, breaking down some barriers in this sport and really kind of sharing some of this confidence around, because it would be great to see more of you guys and to see more of everyone on the water when we can. So stay safe, have a nice weekend, everyone, and speak to you soon.